me and Monroe, and have her speak to our chapter. She's probably the best known park ranger in Marin County. And for many years, as I'm sure many of you know, she was the site supervisor of Muir Woods. She's now the Golden Gate National Recreation Area Community Liaison to Marin County. And on the side, in her spare time, what little there is, she is a volunteer for the Xerxes Society on their Monarch coordinator. And at the end, after she deals with Muir Woods, she'll bring us a bit of an update on this amazing eruption of monarchs that we've been experiencing recently, which she has probably more firsthand information of than anybody. A little about Mia, she's been a national park ranger since 1978. Bay Nature ran an article which was on what they called local heroes. And Mia was one of Bay Nature's local heroes for her lifetime of work in the parks. The Sierra Club in 2016 gave her the Edward Bennett Lifetime Achievement Award. And it's with great pleasure that I turn this over to Mia to talk about winter wonderlands in the works in Muir Woods. Now, unfortunately, her server she says is down, so we're not able to see her, but she's still able to share her screen and give us some slides. So Mia, why don't you take it?
Thank you very much, David, for that wonderful introduction. And I guess I made the ranger's choice today. I walked in the winter wonderland of Muir Woods, and I saw the scene on the screen that I truly wish for every visitor every day: a walk in the forest primeval. And now it is a winter wonderland. So many shades of green, moisture in nearly every form, the quiet, but it's the sounds of the forest. I heard a winter wren in the distance, the babble of the creek, the rush of the wind up in the canopy, and just here and there, but most of the time I had the woods to myself. And so many would come up and just say it was the best thing that they do these days for the tonic of as a tonic for what's going on in the world. And the other thing I heard, I've been at the woods at least 1 or 2 days for the last month as Ranger Mia again. The thing that I've really been so happy to hear, so many locals come up to me and they say, I have not been here in years. The reservation system kind of scared me. I thought it was just overrun, but I have friends from out of town. I have family now staying with me. I was looking for a safe place to be. I wanted to be somewhere that puts the world in perspective, and it is Muir Woods. The reservation system was easy. I pulled right in and found a parking spot, entered the woods, and my whole visit was in the redwood forest. There was something for children. There was something for my elderly aunt. I could think about the bigger things and have it all put in perspective. And that's my wish for you. If you haven't been to Muir Woods in a while, please come back. Please come walk the trails. And also, what I'm going to share with you today, besides just a reminder and a refresher of how beautiful it is we're in the middle of something called Redwood Renewal. And I'm just so proud to share with you how my colleagues have put together an amazing package of restoration and welcoming to visitors that just brings in so many different kind of park employees to make it happen. And I did happen to notice in the participant list that there's someone I'd like to immediately give a shout out to, and that's Betty Young. She was there in the beginning with our Muir Woods nursery. She was there helping us learn how important it was to do thorough plant inventories, to methodically weed out the non-natives, to have a plan for all the restoration enthusiasm that people like me just wanted to undertake. And she brought in volunteers and she professionalized in the Park Service the role of native plant nurseries. So I just want to say that today's walk is in the path of many who have helped inspire the park's work now. It's a collaboration with the Conservancy, the Coastal Conservancy, and many others, and it's done by many stewards, such as some of you possibly on this Zoom call right now. It's just really exciting to see this happening. Okay, we've got this beautiful scene of forest primeval. You can imagine yourself in a misty morning with the light coming in. You can imagine possibly a pileated woodpecker up in the forest canopy. And we're going to take a little walk here. You probably have already seen properly scaled the forest path there, and we're going to see what's happening next. Okay, David, we tried this, but my clicker's not working.
Oh my.
Okay, we'll try it again.
Mia, try unsharing your screen and coming back in again, because
Okay.
it did work before when we tried it.
Right. Okay. We'll try this again. Okay, we'll try this once more. Now, here is a bird that was found during the winter storms.
It's
On-
not Mia, it's not sharing yet.
Oh, you can't see it?
No.
Oh, okay. Hold on a second here. It's up on my screen, that's why. We thought we were covering all the bases. Can you see it now, David?
No, no,
So you don't see a bird now?
no, no. Did you hit the red button to go back out of it? Yeah, you did. And hit the green button and then hit share screen.
Okay, we'll give this another try. We'll let everybody have a little redwood reverie. Imagine their last time to a redwood forest.
There. Now we're seeing the bird.
Okay, so we had an amazing event in October, the Atmospheric River, and it's preceded by a serious drop in atmospheric pressure and high winds, and rangers walking the path found birds on the ground. And that's one of the joys of redwoods, is not only experiencing the redwood forest, but also coming in close contact with the critters. And what was so amazing about this story is the rangers found the bird, but there were visitors there who were able to turn around and take it to wild care, which then promptly fed it a little bit and released it. So a big part of this story is that it really takes a village to take care of the forest in so many different ways. And there's so many different roles for volunteers to be helping, and people rise to the occasion. Now, here's another story that's just amazing. And this is a northern spotted owl. And this species was listed in the 1990s. And at that time, we only knew of two breeding pairs, one at Tamales and the one at Muir Woods. But we knew very little about the spotted owl, because Muir Woods, one of the tenets of our park management, is that we're only open during the day. We're a day use park because we want the wildlife in the forest to have as much time without us as with visitors. But that also means we didn't know too much about the nocturnal world. We didn't know too much about the bats. We didn't know about the bioluminescent millipedes, and we didn't know about the spotted owls. But with endangered species listing, we had to do an inventory. We had to ask, are spotted owls still at Muir Woods? How many birds? How many breeding pairs? What is the success of, do they fledge? Do they, and then all of a sudden we started realizing it's one thing to learn about the spotted owls at Muir Woods, but we began worrying, where did the juveniles go? If a bird lost a mate, where was mate recruitment? And then we began monitoring in a volunteer program all throughout the county. And we made amazing discoveries that in Marin, due to past forest management, are second and third growth forest. And you notice that I'm using those words carefully because Muir Woods is a primeval old growth forest, but most of Marin has been logged. And it used to be a trivia question, and I'm going to pose it to you now, and you can put it in the chat. It used to be a trivia question. What is the significance of Muir Woods? And many people would say it's the only old growth forest in Marin. But your trivia question for tonight is, where else in Marin is there old growth? But while you're pondering that, let me go back to what I mentioned to you. In Marin, there's a lot of second and third growth redwoods, but the logging happened so long ago, and most of Marin open space has been under protection for a long time, which means that much of the character that spotted owls need has recovered throughout Marin, and we have the best haven for spotted owls in the West. They're under siege up north in Washington and Oregon and Northern California because of the invader barred owls. But here in Marin, we have a healthy breeding population. Some might even be in your backyard. And I'd like to acknowledge Marin Audubon for working with neighbors to take care of spotted owls because they're fortunate to be neighbors of the owls. But in Muir Woods, we've taken it a big step further, and the other land managing agencies have followed our lead. Because when we learned that we had not just one pair of spotted owls, but two pairs, and that we really needed to protect these nocturnal birds, we said, you know, what do we need to do? And the big question was providing quiet during the day. So we did an evaluation of all the different sources of noises, from car doors and car horns and backup beepers, even the cash registers in the visitor center, the ice machine, the dumpsters, you name it. We went to an electric fleet, we moved the dumpsters out of the woods, and most importantly for this talk, we have a very narrow window of time in which we do our work. We do not do anything above a human conversational tone from February 1st until the middle of July, which is the spotted owl breeding period, when they pair up, they select a nest site, they lay eggs, they rear their young, the young fledge, etc. We don't do anything louder than a conversational tone during that time. So the work I'm going to be describing that makes up Redwood Renewal, which is replacing water lines and trails and doing salmon enhancement work, is all done from August into January. And all thanks to our urge to protect this spotted owl. Now, some of you probably know that Redwood Renewal is fueled by our concern about crowding and millions of visitors coming to Muir Woods. And you probably think that those are human visitors. But guess what? Something else visits by the millions, and that's the ladybug, the convergent lady beetle. And here it is clustered on the horsetail. And this year was one of the most abundant years for ladybugs that any of us has seen. Millions up on the Bootjack Trail in various locations. And until a couple of weeks ago, we could see them doing what they do during the winter, which is go underneath the leaf litter to protect from cold and rain, because soon an orgy will happen, an orgy of mating ladybugs, and then the females will spread their little wings and fly to the Central Valley, which could be the wine country or the Sacramento Valley, to lay their eggs on newly emerging leaves, where their next generation will be just avid eaters of aphids. Okay, here is an incredible shot of the California coast redwood, Sequoia sempervirens, being climbed by the team from Humboldt State, Steve Sillett and team, and they came to Muir Woods in 2014. That was when we were part of the National Geographic BioBlitz program. And in getting ready for the National Park Service's centennial, which was in 2016, Nat Geo sponsored a BioBlitz in one park each year for a decade. 2014 was GGNRA's, Golden Gate National Recreation Area's chance. And we put our own special spin on it. We had scientists from all over in their specialties at sites throughout the GGNRA for a minimum of 24 hours. People like you and me accompanied the scientists to be community scientists. Many of us were introduced to INAT at that time. And then the extra spin on it, students from Bay Area schools accompanied us so that they could see what science-based decision-making was like. They could see what kind of questions we were posing. They could mix and mingle with scientists, and we could listen to what was on their mind. And at Muir Woods, the Save the Redwoods League sponsored the tree climbing team because we had always wondered just how tall are our trees. But we also asked some other very important questions, like what lives in that special habitat of the canopy? What is up there? What birds nest? What lichen? What salamanders? We also wanted to know what is the biomass and carbon sequestration values of the redwoods. Very, very important questions in this era of climate change when redwoods are one of the biggest storers of carbon. They sequester so much in their heartwood, and they do it for a very, very long time. So, of course, we also wanted to know, as the National Park Service managing Muir Woods for 114 years. Yes, Muir Woods celebrated 114 years as a unit of the National Park Service yesterday. We wanted to know, is our forest in good health? And we learned some pretty amazing things. Yes, the trees grow their whole life. Yes, they're doing their job of storing carbon. And yes, they're in good health because redwoods at this moment in history, and remember for redwoods, that goes back to the Cretaceous period, they are growing faster than at any other time in their history. And I'm going to give the answer, but some of you may want to write in the chat why you think redwoods are growing more right now. And some of you mathematicians may wonder, why can they grow more as they get older and get bigger? And the answer happens to be that we are in an amazing sweet spot. There is more carbon dioxide out there. Bad news. There is less fog. Bad news. But it happens to be for the ultimate opportunists, which are redwoods, the sweetest time, because thanks to that miracle called photosynthesis, more carbon dioxide means that they can do more photosynthesizing. They are pumping more carbon dioxide into their biomass than at any other time, thanks to lots and lots of leaves. And then that little bit of fog that we have is letting in more light. So the formula of photosynthesis is working perfectly for redwoods right now. And who's the beneficiary? Those of us walking in the woods getting a super dose of oxygen. And hopefully the redwoods are doing their part for climate change by changing the carbon CO2 balance by doing their job every single day. So I hope you all figured that out, and it's kind of amazing. And the scientists who climbed the trees told us that our redwoods are healthy, that they are growing, that there's great biodiversity, but they also told us reconnect the creek to the forest. Let the creek flood. The redwoods need deep drinks of water regularly. They need to be connected to the creek. So that's a big goal of Redwood Renewal. Okay, these beautiful bridges, I just love them. There's 4 of them that cross Redwood Creek. We actually have a couple of other bridges, the Dipsy Bridge, which is really just a plank, and Fern Creek. But these four that cross Redwood Creek in Muir Woods, you can sit and watch the creek, you can look for fish, you can wait for friends, you can watch the forest. It makes short, medium, and long visits possible. But guess what? Even though something really works seemingly well, it's actually a problem. This bridge is too short and too low. That means that to protect the abutments over the years, we've had to straighten and manage Redwood Creek upstream and downstream. The creek has not been able to meander. It's not been able to accumulate large woody debris. It's not been able to form deep pools and undercut banks, all because these bridges are too low and too short. So this is a big effort in the years ahead. We're going to make higher, longer bridges. But you know what that means? That means the trail system connecting needs to be moved away from the creek channel and farther into the forest. And that's what we're in the middle of doing right now. So if you haven't been to Muir Woods recently, you're going to see in a number of places where the trails have already been realigned away from the creek channel, giving you amazing intimate views of the forest, opportunities to see things and be up close and personal like you haven't been. And the trails are in place ready for when we put new bridges in the next few years. Another bird. And this one relates to a very special day at Muir Woods, International Migratory Bird Day. Because another trivia question for you, what are the resident birds at Muir Woods? There's only a small handful, but most of them migrate through, either stopping for food or to nest or to wait out a storm. And every year we celebrate International Migratory Bird Day, and we highlight the relationship of the forest and the plants to bird life. We give people a chance up close and personal to see birds and their feeding strategies, their camouflage strategies, and how they use the forest. So education is a real big goal of ours. Look up into the canopy. This is an amazing view. And when I see it, I see a couple of things. One is when I was in Muir Woods today, the forest floor is covered, carpeted with redwood sorrel, yes, but also redwood seeds. Redwoods are monoecious, and when I look up at the top of the canopy, like I'm able to do when I'm lying on the boardwalk and looking up a family circle, up in the canopy, that's where the male parts are, the pollen sacs. And on the lower branches are the female parts that we call cones. And two things are going on right now. With the late winter winds, the male pollen is coating the redwood with yellow pollen and fertilizing the lower cones, but also the winds are shaking last year's cones, which opened last fall. They're shaking them, and like a salt shaker, out comes the little seeds that are like a fleck of oatmeal, and they're falling to the ground at just the perfect time because we've had significant flood events. And redwoods, as I mentioned earlier, are opportunists. So their little naked seeds fall to the forest floor, which has to be fresh mineral soil, either prepared by a flood that laid silt down or a fire that burned away the organic leaf litter, which we didn't have in Muir Woods this year, but it has to be prepared. And maybe a windfall. Yes, a few redwoods fell this year and exposed fresh mineral soil. So we have a great seed fall. We've had a seedbed preparation event, thanks to that October 25 atmospheric river and subsequent flood events. And so we expect to see redwood, as in the species renewal, this coming spring and in the future. And that's one of the signs of a healthy redwood forest, natural renewal of the redwoods. When I also look up into the canopy, I'm reminded of a couple of other things. I'm reminded how amazing redwoods are because they have two methods of reproduction. There's a good chance that when this picture was taken, it was in a family circle, an asexual cloning method of redwood reproduction from burls. I described a moment ago seeds, the sexual method, which isn't very common because it takes that disaster event for the seeds to germinate. So when you walk in Muir Woods next time, see if you can pick out the ones that started from seed, standing all by themselves, and then the ones that started from burl, asexual sprouting, the ones that are close together or possibly in a family circle. This is also a good time to remind you that in our county, we have incredible redwood resources, and at a park that's similar in size and quality to Muir Woods, Roy's Redwoods, OneTam is undertaking a restoration effort to define the paths, protect the understory, and hopefully offer another old growth experience to the people of Marin. So maybe some of you answered that trivia question, but I just gave away another old growth patch in Marin. Now this is one of the things you might have read about in the newspaper. This is the famous crosscut. And some of you might think it's famous because it's been there longer than most of us. But it's also famous from Kim Novak wandering in vertigo and being quite confused and experiencing sort of some issues with time. But for me as a ranger, one of the most common questions was, how old are these trees? And I just imagine a ranger in 1930 when a redwood fell in Cathedral Grove saying, aha, my chance. I'm going to slice this up like a loaf of bread. I'm going to polish it. I'm going to count the rings, and I'm going to share with the public. And you can do the math because he determined that the tree was born in 909 AD. And he's going to be able to tell people not only how old most of the redwoods, the mature redwoods, are, over 1,000 years old, but he's going to encourage people to look a little more closely and see the wide rings that relate to times when there was more rain or the creek flooded, and then the rings that are close together that relate to periods of drought. And he's going to point out the fire scars so that we learn that fire was a frequent visitor. And then started the famous parlor game at Muir Woods, because when I arrived, it was all European history. The Magna Carta, the Battle of Hastings were on those white rings, because that ranger learned that people have a hard time standing still for a couple of minutes, much less imagining a tree standing in one place for 1,000 years. So we had to relate some history to the age of the tree. But we don't just tell Western history anymore. So that's when the parlor game started. How should we label the rings? And what we came up with was events in human history on the North American continent. And that's what you see on this crosscut. But modern rangers are now telling a much more extensive history. They're acknowledging the timeless periods of stewardship by the Miwok peoples. They recognize the role of the women's clubs in helping save redwoods. They are expanding our understanding of who made history, who stewarded the land, who walked in the woods. And if you walk in Muir Woods these days, I encourage you to go to Founders Grove, which we used to call the Pincho tree, and we expanded it to Founders to include all those who worked very, very hard to save Muir Woods. You'll see a fascinating exhibit called Under Construction that really expands the story of not only who worked hard in our state to take care of the redwoods, who encouraged protection of Muir Woods, what the long lineage of Miwok stewardship is, and also that there's kind of some imperfect histories out there too. So when you take a walk in Muir Woods, please pause at these two exhibits to learn a little bit more about our history as well. Lucky kids. When I worked at Muir Woods on New Year's, I can't even begin to tell you, my most popular job, and I was really busy doing this, was swearing in junior rangers from all over the world. Kids who want to learn about the value of being curious, of keeping track, asking questions, drawing and journaling, and they get to be junior rangers. So here's a couple that we welcomed a little bit ago. And one of the things that you see in Muir Woods are the burls, the knobby, compact bud tissue that when stimulated by a lot more water, like in a storm or a flood event, or when heated by a fire, or when damaged by another tree falling and scraping off bark, then that bud tissue springs into action and actually begins to grow new branches or even a new tree. And for those of you looking closely at this, besides the burls, you can see the fire scar in the lower left. And the last couple of years have been so challenging in the Redwood region. Fires have scorched Armstrong redwoods, burned down Big Basin, and many other Santa Cruz and San Mateo parks. And then now, of course, the apparent tragedy in the sequoias of Sequoia National Park. Redwoods have thick bark. They have tannin that doesn't burn well. The redwood forest is moist. Redwoods are resilient. And the early news from Big Basin and other Santa Cruz and San Mateo parks is that we have the opportunity of a lifetime to watch these forests spring back to life. The redwoods begin sprouting, the forest floor recover. Even the murres and murrelets are still nesting. It's amazing. I encourage you to check out the Save the Redwoods League websites and the Sempervirens Fund websites to see the stories of what they are learning about recovery and about the resilience of the redwoods. They've been on Earth since the Cretaceous. They've put up with a lot, so they've got a few tricks up their trunk there. And also, this is an opportunity to be part of the visioning process. How do we want to access redwoods in the future? What kind of experiences do we want? How do we want to welcome back Indigenous people as stewards? How do we want to offer kids varied experiences? How do we want to reshape and recast our own expectations? So there's amazing opportunities to participate in helping re-envision the future. The boardwalks. I got to tell you, these boardwalks are one of my favorite experiences in Muir Woods. We used to have asphalt, a petroleum product, paths. And not only are we removing the asphalt, but we have these elevated paths that allow for the forest floodwaters to go underneath, critters to safely make their way from one side to the other. And do you notice there are no handrails? People respect the boardwalk. It is a problem of the past, off-trail travel, trampling the redwood roots and the forest understory. It is amazing how respectful people now are. The boardwalks are made out of redwood, either from recycled buildings or other people's decks. We also buy second and third growth redwood from an extremely reputable company. And the new boardwalk that we just reinstalled the arch, if you just imagine the entrance to Muir Woods, it was closed until Christmas because the trail crew had to replace the boardwalk, which literally saw millions of people walking on it in the last 20 years. So that boardwalk was replaced, and much of the wood they were able to reuse simply by sanding it and preparing the surface. So today we put the arch back up so that we establish you are entering a special place. There are special rules and guidelines, and you're going to see people hard at work. And the boardwalk is just like a piece of fine furniture. It's kind of amazing. Okay, Native Plant Society. This slide is for you. You walk in the woods and it smells so fresh. And then you catch a whiff of something kind of yucky, something kind of dead. And then you remember that that wildflower that blooms even before winter starts, usually in early December, the fetid adder's tongue is now blooming in the woods, and you are smelling what often brown flowers do, smell like rotten flesh, so that little flies, the pollinating flies, can come in and pollinate. And then later, the seed pods give it the other name, slink pod, because they fall to the ground and they have a little sugary package on the seed pod to attract ants that will carry the seeds away. And this has been an amazing story. We've learned about the value of pollinators, the strategies that plants use to lure pollinators in, and then later how they disperse the seeds. And as we've worked hard to define the paths in Muir Woods and restore the forest floor, we've had the helpers of those ants carrying the little seed packets around, so that now fetid adder's tongue are among the many plants that are now common on the forest floor that we've spent so many years renewing. It's been wonderful watching nature guiding and lending that helping hand as the forest floor is recovered. I remember in my earliest days at Muir Woods, there was that one fetid adder's plant, that one glade where other plants like hound's tongue were found. It was kind of impoverished, but now thanks to the nursery and the biotechs and nature, the forest floor is just rebounding with diversity. So this is one plant that you can find, and it's kind of easy to find because of those big strappy parallel leaves that are also mottled. And here's another view of it. This is Scoliopus bigelovii. And then another one that's about to bloom is the Trillium. This is Trillium ovatum. And this one is what we also call wake robin, because it's one of the earliest blooming flowers. I didn't see any when I walked in the woods today, but I did see another one who has several common names, milkmaids or rainbells or toothwort. So we see that one blooming already in the forest. And I found the leaves of the Western hound tongue as well coming up. This is another success story. The most common plant in the redwood forest is Oxalis redwood sorrel, and it now carpets the forest floor, and it soon will be in bloom. And this one holds the moisture in the forest floor, and it is such a shade lover. When the sun hits the forest floor, it folds up, it like squints in the sunshine. In a little bit, we'll see Clintonia or bead lily blooming. And this one was also uncommon in the redwood forest. It has now come back abundantly. And one of my favorite stories about it is it's a real testament to how respectful our visitors are, because this plant has sprung up on a number of redwood logs. In the furrows of the redwood bark, the bead lily, which is the other name, the seeds were dropped maybe by a bird. And the fact that you can walk in the forest and see the leaves come up and see it go to flower and seed without anybody stepping onto that log for an Instagram photo is a real credit to how respectful our visitors are. And it also underscores the importance of the logs in the forest. That's one of the identifiers of being a healthy old growth forest is the logs and the plant communities they support as time release elements of the redwoods. So here we are in Cathedral Grove, which you probably won't recognize anymore. It used to be a loop through Cathedral Grove, but the westernmost leg of the loop was so close to the creek. And some people, well, maybe Betty, maybe Wendy Poinceau might remember how we had a team coming into the woods to say, if you could only do 4 things in the park to help the redwood forest and the creek, where would they be? And one of them was beyond Cathedral Grove, where the creek was very close to the path, and we removed the path and put a boardwalk in, and the creek was able to meander immediately. Another was Cathedral Grove, where there was a loop, and the westernmost part of the loop was so close to the creek that we were protecting the path rather than the creek. So what did we do? Out came that path, and the bank and the creek was part of the salmon enhancement work that we did in 2019 and 2020. And we were able to start removal of the riprap. That's the rock wall that was put in by the CCC in the 30s when they straightened the creek and said to the creek, behave, no flooding. Well, we now know that the salmon need a meandering creek. They need gravel They need undercut banks and deep pools. And by channelizing the creek, all that had been wiped out. And we also now know that the forest needs connectivity between the creek and the forest and needs the deep drink that comes from a flood event. So by removing that trail, we were able to remove the riprap, bury the rocks, just kind of level the banks, and the October 25th atmospheric river storm affirmed the value of that because the large woody debris stayed anchored. The channel was just a series of pools and meanders, and Cathedral Grove flooded. So I can hear you all cheering right now that that first phase of salmon enhancement work was just a stunning success. And David has put a link in the chat because that October 25th atmospheric river storm was an amazing event. First, it was a huge storm at an unusual time. We usually have rain in October, but not dumping inches and inches that cleansed the creek, sent a huge flush of water, opened the bar at Muir Beach, flooded the forest, and we had an amazing response. We had over 100 Chinook, that's king salmon, coming up in November to spawn in Redwood Creek. Several things about that are amazing. The sheer number, and then also the species. In our living memory, we have not seen Chinook in Redwood Creek. So what happened? Well, first of all, we had a lot of water. Add water sure helps. We had that salmon enhancement work to provide the right spawning habitat. But the story is even more interesting and very poignant because what happened in the last 4 years were the hatcheries on the great rivers of California, the American, the Feather, the Yuba. There's fish hatcheries up there, and the millions of young fish that they were rearing could not be released into those rivers because they were too low because of the drought we were in. They were too warm. And so what happened? They did a big experiment. They brought millions of young Chinook to the Golden Gate, and they released them at the Golden Gate. Some of them, of course, became fish food, and some of them grew up in the ocean, and not having a natal stream, they surged up in the October. Remember, they're fall running salmon. These fall spawning salmon came up to the coastal streams of Redwood Creek and Lagunitas. They came into the bay and went up the creeks in the East Bay. Just an amazing, resilient response of life wanting to persist. So we had over 100 salmon, Chinook in November, digging reds, that's the nests, and we found carcasses, and the science goes on. And then the rain continued into December, and that's when we normally have the coho or silver salmon runs, which we did. When I was there on New Year's, I saw big hunky silver salmon. It was very, very exciting. And the problem with Redwood Creek in Muir Woods is that it didn't have good rearing habitat, but that's the goal of the salmon enhancement component of Redwood Renewal, is to improve the rearing or nursery components of the creek. And now we'll see how that piece works, because that's the first phase that you're looking at that was done in 2019 and 2020. And the scientists report that it did its job through the big storms of winter. So let's see if it holds up through the rearing period ahead. Okay, this is a log, a redwood log. And some of you who've been on my talks know that a really big decision at Muir Woods, well, until a few years ago, the guideline was we got to clean up anything bigger than a pencil. Well, we changed that. And what falls on the forest floor is allowed to lie. And the only part we clean up is on the trails, and then we place it back into the forest. But now we have taken that new guideline to an extreme. If you're a log, you might get moved around a little bit. At first, I thought it was kind of like robbing Peter, the forest floor to pay Paul the creek. But now I see the wisdom of using local wood, otherwise known as large woody debris, to be put in the creek channel to replace that very important component of large woody debris in the stream channel to slow the flood waters, to allow the gravel to build up, and to help inform the meandering channel. So this log, nestled among the redwood sorrel and ferns, may have a future in the creek. Ah, the ferns. Do any of you remember walking in Muir Woods and seeing nothing but bare dirt? That was my first memory. Actually, my first memory was walking in Muir Woods. This is now 1981, 82. And I thought I'd gone to heaven because the forest floor was a beautiful powdered blue. It was nothing but forget-me-nots. And those early years as a ranger, I spent a lot of time weeding forget-me-nots because that's an invasive weedy species. And we weeded and weeded and weeded. And then our native plant nursery got established and we began replenishing from local stock the native flora of our forest floor, including dividing and planting the ferns that you now see grace so much of the park. Okay, in summer 2023, you will again see this scene. These are biologists and volunteers, and they are removing baby salmon from above that net because that's what salmon enhancement in Redwood Creek is all about. We work reach by reach or stretch by stretch, and we cordon off a section. We remove and relocate the baby salmon to other parts of Redwood Creek. Then we de-water, we pump out the water. Then comes the heavy equipment to break down the riprap and recontour the stream. Then the net comes out and the water returns and the plant crews come in and begin replanting. And our next salmon enhancement work is planned for spring of 2023, and it will be from the second bridge down and the plaza reach. Okay, we've got these wonderful rangers who welcome each and every visitor and whose goal is to offer experiences in different languages to make sure the park is accessible, to swear in each and every one of those junior rangers, to share the different stories, including the Redwood Renewal that's going on and the careful thought and attention that has gone into it, as well as welcoming volunteers to help with all this. And here is a nod to the little critters that fit right in this newt that makes itself in the forest, makes its home in the forest floor, and is an important goal to expand the different critters that are able to live in Muir Woods, including, my husband said, when I said, what am I going to say about the banana slug? And he said, banana slug slime, how sublime. This is the critter that does that work of helping the renewal of forest resources through eating dead stuff. And of course, kids, you could always see their attention snap when you tell them about that hole in the side and how they breathe and poop out of the same side. Banana slugs are endlessly fascinating, but I have to tell you, I've not seen one in 6 months, so I don't know what's up, but I'm going to keep checking because they are the denizen of a healthy, moist, old-growth redwood forest. So on that note, I want to shift from this invertebrate to another, which is the Western Monarch. As David mentioned, I'm one of the volunteers with the Xerxes Society that I have a specific role, which is the Thanksgiving and New Year's counts. And this year was very trepidatious because last year and the year before, we saw so few monarchs. The prediction was that the migration and overwintering phenomena was on an extinction vortex because we saw less than 2,000 in 2019 and 2020, and we just did not know what to expect this year. But early reports, thanks to INAT in Nevada and Colorado and northern New Mexico and Arizona, said breeding in those areas was happening. However, INAT reports did not show that story in the breeding grounds that feed Marin County and other San Francisco Bay Area overwintering sites. So this year, I'm very sad to report that that great news that most of you have been hearing about the uptick in monarchs, that news is in the core central part of the state, Monterey to Los Angeles. Think Pacific Grove, think Andrew Molera, think Pismo Beach and Elwood. That's where the monarchs have made a resurgence. Over 200,000 monarch butterflies returned there this year to overwinter. Kind of a drop in the bucket to what we used to have, but certainly a good start on the road to recovery. That is not the story in the San Francisco Bay region, Sonoma, Marin, East Bay counties, San Francisco, San Mateo. We still had just a few. I count them in handfuls, 5 here, 10 there. But the good news is that every site had a few. So there's potential. They're still drawn to our historic sites. And I think I saw Alice on the guest list here. She is one of my comrades in recovery here. We are working with local nurseries. We are working with public spaces and school gardens and home gardeners to plant native milkweed where native milkweed once grew. So that would be Asclepias fascicularis, the narrow-leafed milkweed in Marin. Plant nectar plants and be a good community scientist. We are very active in a monarch working group to help people know where to plant and to keep track and to spread the word that monarchs need our help. There's something everybody can do. So we saw a few, and there's lots of room for more monarchs. So thank you to all of you who have been supporting the restoration at Muir Woods as volunteers or working there. Thank you to those of you part of the Marin Working Group. And I bet we have lots of questions, David, and thank you again for this invitation.
Thank you, Mia. And we have a question in the chat. Are barred owls at Muir Woods?
So barred owls were first observed in Marin County at Muir Woods. And it was of grave concern because we saw immediately what others had observed. The spotted owls gave up their own territory and retreated to hidden corners and stopped calling, but they were able to hold on. They were able to breed and wait their opportunity. So when the barred owl pair, I think it was the male, died, then the spotted owls were able to move back into Muir Woods. But now we have an extensive countywide monitoring program, and we not only look for spotted owls, but also for barred owls to see, well, if they're here and what we need to do, what steps we need to take to protect the spotted owls. One thing that may be helpful is that it's been documented that barred owls are not just the survivors because they are able to hunt during the day and they're bigger and more aggressive than spotted owls, but they made their way to California and other coastal areas, coastal forests, due to human changes in habitat. So that's why we kind of favor and protect the spotted owls.
If you'd like to ask a question, I'd suggest, because I can only see a part of the all of you, that you use the reaction button, which is on the bottom of the computer, and hit the raise hand, which gives you an electronic hand that puts you at the top of the list.
Well, I see some really great suggestions about where else there is old growth in Marin, and the pioneer tree in Samuel P. Taylor is old growth, and Roy's Redwoods is about 550 acres, just like Muir Woods, and it's old growth, as is Steep Ravine. So those are the old growth forests. I see someone, I think it's Felicia, calling out Harold Richardson Redwoods Reserve, which is a real special story. It was in private hands till just a few years ago. And the Save the Redwoods League was able to purchase it. And they're now figuring out how to open it to the public. What's the infrastructure, trails, parking lots, bathrooms, etc.
Michael Mooney is asking, is Muir Woods getting less moisture from fog?
Well, that's a really good question. And I don't have a specific answer because we don't have that kind of a rain gauge, a fog gauge at Muir Woods, but the Bay Area has 30% less fog. So I would presume that Muir Woods is also suffering from less fog. It's kind of hard to know how to feel because, as I mentioned, less fog means more sunlight and therefore more photosynthesis. But in the long run, fog, because redwoods are reliant on fog, would be a bad thing for redwoods.
You talked earlier about all the redwood seeds, and the lore I've always relied on is that redwoods almost never regenerate from seeds. And I'm just wondering whether that is based upon the poor habitat that you talked about, that you experienced when you first came to Muir Woods. And I'm just wondering if there have been any studies of very favorable habitats and whether they actually do seed.
Well, as I mentioned, seed germination happens after what we would think of as a disaster, a flood or a fire or wind throw. And we've been pretty good at keeping those disasters because that's how we view them at bay. So the seeds haven't had a chance to germinate because there hasn't been the mineral soil. But whenever we allow flooding or a fire, we see extensive redwood regeneration from seed. And that's what they're also seeing at Big Basin, a lot of seed regeneration. So in one sense, you're right. You know, redwoods are gymnosperms. They have naked seeds and the seed is viable for just a short while and they have to fall to the ground in mineral soil at just the right time. And that's why they produce thousands a year and over a lifetime, that's millions, is to give at least one of them a chance. But if we allow the opportunities for seed regeneration to happen, it happens prolifically.
Yvonne McHugh says, you mentioned the height of the trees were determined a few years ago. Can you share what was found? I would add to that whether they found a separate ecosystem. I remember a National Geographic article a few years ago about the very kind of unique ecosystems that the researchers found at the top of redwoods. And I'm wondering whether any of that was found in Muir Woods.
Yes, so the first question was that so to get ready for the Nat Geo BioBlitz, we needed to do a LiDAR flyover, and that produced a laser image. It was a little laser beam that went up and down, and then the tree climbers could go to where the tallest trees or trees with specific canopy structures. So we got a modern map and we were able to learn that our tallest trees are between 270 and 280 feet tall. So we got that question answered. And maybe some of them have grown and they also shrink a little bit during drought. So we are always kind of approximate when we give the numbers, especially the height. And also that canopy community, some of you might have read the book Wild Trees by Richard Preston, in which he tells the story of these tree climbers and also how special and diverse and abundant the life is up in the canopy. And our tree climbers found a lot of that in the forest at Muir Woods. They found mini lichen, they found bird nests, they found an arboreal salamander that had never been found in Marin before. They found so many different invertebrates, but they also were puzzled because up farther north, the canopy is distinguished by these huge fern mats of leather fern, Polypodium schooleri, and that is very uncommon in Muir Woods. So what we don't have in our canopy are these huge fern mats that essentially provide that upper story and allow actual shrubs and trees and things to grow. So that's a big question. How come we don't have those fern mats? What happened? So that left us with something to ponder.
Felicia says, what about creek restoration higher up on Mount Tam? There are concrete structures in Fern Creek near the Matt Davis Trail.
One thing that's very exciting is in 2000, 2001, all the land managing agencies in the Redwood Creek watershed got together and developed a vision that would guide our work. And the upper reaches are either Marin Water District or state parks, and they are slowly but surely also doing important measures to protect the creek. They've changed trail practices. They've actually removed some fire roads, and they're also looking at culverts and diversions as well. Most notably below Muir Woods in Mount Tam State Park, they are doing a huge project right now, relocating the Redwood Creek Trail out of the creek channel and putting in resource sensitive crossings for equestrians. And all of this is not only to protect the creek from sediment and erosion, but it's also meant to build up the water storage capacity. There's kind of that myth that the rain that falls in the winter all just flows out and goes to the ocean. Au contraire, it's meant to sink in and build up the water table and replenish the aquifer, and then get released little by little during spring, fall, and summer. And so their work, and also Green Gulch Farm is doing this to build the aquifer, is just indispensable for providing water throughout the year, especially during that critical rearing time for baby fish. So what's really exciting is I've shared with you what we're doing in Muir Woods, but we're collaborators with all the other land managers in the Redwood Creek watershed to slowly but surely replace failing culverts, redesign trails like the Deer Park Fire Road, relocate trails, erase trails when needed, take out infrastructure like you mentioned. It's a very long, slow, expensive process. So little by little, we're doing that.
Larry, you've had your hand up for a while. Why don't you unmute and ask your question?
Okay, so I live within 5 miles of the coast, and this is about the monarchs. And I've heard that you shouldn't plant milkweed within 5 miles of the coast. Now, we have a few monarchs that flit around here, and we actually got a cocoon. It wasn't my cocoon, but it was somebody else's cocoon. And so I'm just curious about that. I don't know, not regulation, but advice.
Right. The Xerces Society is grappling with how to communicate the most obvious solution we all go to, which is planting milkweed, because we know that monarch butterflies have to lay their eggs on milkweed, and the milkweed in turn gives them incredible poisonous protection. Okay, we know that, but how do we responsibly apply that? And some of us think in measurements, so that's where the 5 miles came from, but it really has to do with one principle, which is plant milkweed where milkweed once grew, and it never grew along the coast. If you look at the amazing tools that show where native plant distribution is, like Calscape, you will not find milkweed near the coast. And you will not find milkweed near the overwintering sites of Ballina, Stinson Beach, and Muir Beach. And then if you're one of those that looks at a map and can see the topographic features, look at the coast range. And if you're west of the coast, then you're in the no plant milkweed zone. If you're east, so think of Fairfax and San Rafael, Novato and Terra Linda, Mill Valley, Corte Madera, you can plant milkweed. because that's where milkweed once naturally grew, and the native species is the narrow leaf. So they're trying to grapple with how to communicate with people where you can safely plant native milkweed and where you should not. So the basic thing is not along the coast, not near overwintering sites, and not where it didn't grow, or to put it positively, inland, and the native milkweed.
So that information is on Calscape.
Calscape.
Thank you.
And because we're talking monarchs in depth, this is on the Xerxes website, and you can go to it, savewesternmonarchs.org. And then also in Marin County, are some amazing resources. Turtle Island has plant lists and maps. The EAC website has the Monarch Action Plan for Marin. So there's some local resources to help you sort it out too.
Laura Lovett asks, what parameters are you monitoring in order to track plant biodiversity and whether it is increasing or decreasing?
Is that a Muir Woods question then?
I assume so.
Yeah. So one thing that we're very lucky about at Muir Woods is being an old national park and a park where rangers kept track. As I mentioned, we celebrated our 114th birthday yesterday, is we have plant lists and maps of what once grew. And so that has guided what we wish to grow in our nursery, what to look for in little hidden corners where it once grew. And then we have the benefit of so many knowledgeable people, like many of the people on this Zoom, to help us find those plants, to help us weed, to help us learn the best reproduction methods, etc. We benefit from institutions like UC Berkeley and Cal Academy with their early collections and the guidance on successional planting and things like that. So biodiversity and resilience are major goals, but restoring the special redwood forest community that is Muir Woods is foremost. We've learned that it's not quite the same community as Roy's Redwoods, for example, or Samuel P. Taylor. And we've learned that due to the geologic past, there's a southern range that's kind of like Santa Cruz and Big Sur. And then there's our middle range, which is Marin. And we're very different than the northern redwoods. And it could be the fog and the rain. It could be the much more infrequent fires. It could be the geologic history. So we're very careful to try to encourage our own biodiversity. And that is not just plants, that we celebrate the banana slugs and ladybugs and newts, and that BioBlitz was amazing. I was there learning more about the mosquitoes and bioluminescent millipedes and that arboreal salamander. It's all important. And those are also important indicator species of how well our work is. Do we still have spotted owls? Are our salmon recovering? Do we have camel crickets? Are the Pacific salamanders thriving? These are all indicators of whether we're doing the job and it's working.
Mitchell Nudelman asked, is there too much woody biomass that could accelerate fire events during a prolonged drought? If so, is there a need for well-managed thinning of dead wood or debris, at least at natural fire breaks?
Yeah, since the early days at Muir Woods, rangers have been worrying about the brushy woody debris, which would carry a fire. The big logs aren't as much a concern because they're so damp. And of course, so many of them had been removed early on. And so we've examined brush clearing, and we've also embarked on several controlled or prescribed burn plans. We've burned about 10% of the forest to see how fire and the forest respond. And that's kind of our ultimate goal, is to have small spot fires in the park to not only bring back the critical role of fire, but also to help reduce some of that brushy debris. And then of course, heck, a few more winters like this will take care of our problem too.
Yeah. Helen Enquist asked, do bobcats pass through Muir Woods?
Oh, Thank you for bringing that up. We don't see bobcats in the woods very often, but we see them on the edges. We see coyote regularly, skunks, gray squirrels, gray fox, raccoon, many different species of birds. So we see those mid-size mammals, but I don't really know why bobcat don't come in. It could be that we don't have quite the right balance of prey for them. But if you go on the upper trails, which would be Canopy View, Deer Park, Dipsy, etc., you commonly see them up there.
Okay.
Of course, there's the bats. That's been a big focus of our study, is the nighttime stuff.
Okay, I think we've come to the end of questions unless anybody wants to raise their hand. And I want to express our appreciation to you, Mia. It's been a great presentation. I confess I have not been to Muir Woods since the whole traffic plan and traffic management plan was put in, and I'm now committed to getting over there fairly quickly, as I imagine many others on this program are as well, thanks to your discussion. So I can't tell you who the speaker will be yet for next month, but watch out for your email, because as soon as we know, we will circulate an email as in the past, giving you the sign-in information. And
May I have the last word, David?
yes, please.
Well, many of you who know me know I always need to bring John Muir into things, and I just encourage you to go for a walk and then end up spending all day, because to go into a forest is to go into the universe. And I hope I'm the one that encounters you when you walk on the trails, and maybe when we can organize field trips, maybe I can welcome the Native Plant Society on a field trip. There's nothing healthier than being out in nature. And right now, Muir Woods is a very safe place to be.
It's a very appropriate closing. Thank you, Mia. We look forward to seeing you next month.